Are you looking to becoming more right or working towards becoming less wrong? Well, yesterday I was coaching my son to prepare him for his bite-sized test in math. And as we were working through the sum itself, one of the questions that I gave him was take a four-digit number. So we came up with the number 4359. And the next was I told him to basically identify how many thousands, how many hundreds, how many tens, and how many ones. And so, of course, the answer was for 1,000, 100, 5 tens, and 9 ones. And then it struck me at the point in time that, hey, there has to be a way to teach this young man that that is not the only answer, because under different circumstances the answers could change. So immediately I asked him, I said that, well, if you are given a situation whereby you are going to the bank and you need to withdraw this amount of money, and the cashier says, and you tell the cashier that I want the least number of dollar bills, then what would the combination and what would the answer be? And so he gave a set of answers. And then immediately I changed the circumstance to, what if the teller tells you that they have ran out of $1,000 bills? Then what would your answer be? And then again, he gave a different set of answers. And again, I changed the circumstance to, what if it is a situation whereby they tell you that they can only give you 20 $10 bills? And so what would your answer be? And then he came up with a different set of answers. And so the thing that I was wanting to prove to him was that under certain circumstances, the answer to the question could change. And that was important because I didn't want him to go away thinking that there is only one answer and there is only one way to answer that question. Because in life, there are never quite a set of defined answers that is the only way to achieve a certain end goal. So for example, if I want to achieve a certain end goal in life, where do I find, what would be the way to approach that? And so, of course, in life, like I said, we do not have a defined set of answers. So what we look to is, well, if other people have been getting that outcome and they are doing it in a certain way, then they have to be correct. Then that way has to be the right way. And so we then copy other people in achieving that goal. However, if we do that, then, at best we will end up is we're just better than them. But one thing is we will never be different. So think of an example like, one time I heard this example related to me. It says that, for example, you have just got a license to operate as a taxi operator in a city. So what would be your approach to go out there and be more successful than the rest of the taxi operators out there? And so the answers would be, I'll probably do more advertising, I'll probably give some incentives to the drivers, I'll probably give some incentives to the passengers. However, if you notice, what happened here is that you would think about within the defined scope of work or the defined scope itself, and you just think, can I do better at this? Can I do better at that? Can I do this slightly differently? Can I do this slightly differently? And it is very unlikely that under that circumstance you would arrive at Uber being the solution, right? So what I'm saying here is that if we just approach the outcome just like what other people have been doing, then at best we would just be better. At worst, we will end up being mediocre and just another Me Too solution to that problem itself. And so then what is the way that we could work around that whole approach itself? So I like to think of it as instead of thinking that I'm becoming more right, work towards the idea of I'm becoming less wrong. And so, one way to think about that is that if you embrace or you approach life in general or work, for example, with the mindset of a researcher, what does a researcher do? So, I can tell you the first step that we do is we clearly define what is the problem or what is the challenge or what is the research question that we want to have answered. And once we have done that, the next step is we do what we call a literature research, literature review. And in the literature review, basically what we want to do is we want to look at who are these other people who have done a fair amount of work researching into answering that question. And we want to see what are the outcomes that they have arrived at, under what circumstances did they conduct their research on, and what are the things that they have uncovered. So we take a look at all these people who have done who have been able to research on this question, and then we come up with our own hypothesis. And once we come up with our own hypothesis, we then go out there and test that hypothesis, whether that hypothesis is valid or not. And of course, in order to tell us that, we need to collect data, and the data will inform us whether are we on the right track, are we becoming less wrong, or are we becoming more wrong. And so here is where I like to kind of get you to think of it as sometimes many of us would kind of carry forward that way of learning that we have done in school into adulthood, and thinking that there is a predefined set of solutions, a predefined set of answers that will help you solve a particular problem. In truth, that may not be the case. And the way to go about that is to be humble and to say that, instead of saying that I'm becoming more right, to say that I want to be less wrong, and I want to test, I want to collect data, I want to collect the information to validate my assumption, my hypothesis, and that's the way that we should approach it. This is the Melvin Live Show, and I'll talk to you soon.